Welcome, folks. Happy Monday. This is Hurricane Hub Live right here on 13 News Now Plus. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandajis, and you know, last week, crickets in the basin. How quickly things can change now that we're here in August. The Atlantic, much more active, and that's what we're going to focus on HHL tonight. Activity out there in the Atlantic basin. We've got 3 areas to watch. In fact, one named storm out there, our 4th of the season, and it goes by the name of Dexter. It formed last night on August the 3rd, which, as you'll see, falls right in line with last year's 4th named storm in 2024. And we're also going to dive a little bit into the longer range forecast models, because if you've been dabbling around on social media, you've probably seen a few snapshots from the European or the GFS 9-10 days out showing a major hurricane hitting some part of the United States. Not only is that misleading, it likely won't verify, and we're going to go through some of the longer range models here and talk about that. You know, it's always a possibility when you get into August that we start to see the development of some stronger storms, but posting anything that far out is just kind of irresponsible. So just don't pay attention to those posts out there on social media. All right, let's look at the names here that we have from our 2025 Atlantic list. So Dexter, we have talked about this way before it developed, but Dexter is the replacement name for Dorian. So this is the same list that we used back in 2019. And, you know, next up is Aaron. Whenever I see the name Aaron, I think back to several iterations ago when this list was used. It happened to be the year 2001. And if you remember that famous satellite image of the East Coast of the United States, the smoke was evident from the Twin Towers terrorist attack. And then several hundred miles to the east was Hurricane Aaron. And this is a storm that, you know, if that had tracked farther to the west, history could have been different. Who knows? But I always think of Aaron when I see that. And that was that hurricane sitting off the coast on September 11th, 2001. On deck behind that is Fernand and then Gabrielle in the Atlantic basin. So let's talk about climatology. When we typically, based on the last 30 hurricane seasons, when we see the 4th named storm develop, and that's typically right smack dab in the middle of August, on August the 15th. Okay, we saw Dexter develop on August the 3rd. Now let's go back a little bit shorter time scale here, the last 6 hurricane seasons and when the 4th named storm developed. And as I mentioned, last year was also August the 3rd that we had the D-named storm develop. And you can see quite a splattering here of all different dates ranging from June to September. So when you average all of these dates out, the average for the last 6 years was July the 26th. So we're a little bit later than that, coming in on August the 3rd. But again, not all that far off. We're early on the larger scheme of things over the last 30 years. And you look at the hurricane season overall playing out, we typically start to see a little more activity, an increase in activity as we hit August. And boy, that's exactly pretty much what's happened. We've got Dexter out there right now. First time we've had a named storm in the basin since July the 8th with Chantal. 45-mile-per-hour winds. You remember a tropical storm, you need 39-mile-per-hour winds or greater. Now, also the good news with this is not going to be affecting anybody. There's Bermuda, well north of Bermuda, and it's moving away from the eastern seaboard. And we switch things up and look at the visible satellite imagery. It's not doing too well. Dexter is weakening because of wind shear, and you could see it pretty evidently here. The low-level circulation is exposed thanks to winds aloft coming in out of the south and west, displacing all of the convection, thunderstorm activity, the higher buildup of the vertical cloud development, displaced to the northeast of that center that you can see there, certainly exposed, getting more and more exposed over time there. So as it builds to the north and east at a pretty good clip as well at 15 miles per hour, we likely won't see any more intensification with this, as wind shear is expected to dominate for at least a while longer. Not that it matters. It's staying out in the middle of the Atlantic, well south of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland area over towards Atlantic Canada, staying out over the open waters. Now, as it does transition to an extratropical cyclone, we could maybe see the wind field expand a little bit as it gains latitude and maybe an uptick in wind speeds of 50 miles per hour. But regardless, no impacts here, at least direct impacts to the U.S. We are seeing an increased surf and rip current risk along the eastern seaboard for the next couple days before it moves even farther away. Now, where it did start to develop was over some record warm sea surface temperatures here over the Gulf Stream just off the southeast coast of the U.S. Now, as it builds farther to the north, gains latitude, it obviously will encounter some slightly cooler ocean waters once it dips below that 80-degree mark. it is no longer really able to harvest that energy from the warm ocean surface. So we'll see a general weakening there as it gains latitude in the coming days. Elsewhere in the Atlantic Basin, not much going on, but it doesn't mean there's nothing we're not watching. Okay, we've got the Saharan dust out there. Concentrations have really dropped, expected this time of the year. But we've got two areas of interest have yet to be tagged as an invest. Okay, we've got one here that you can't even really see much going on here yet because there's not much here yet. Off the southeast coast, in the short term, next 2 days, no chance. And within 7 days, that does scoot up to around a 30% chance of development. We're going to look at some modeling here, and you can see that some of the models are trying to sniff something out, kind of developing like Dexter did, but just staying a little bit closer to land. And then you can see there in the far right-hand corner of your screen, we've got another area we're watching. It has been tagged orange for a higher risk, moderate chance of this developing into a named storm. And this is going to be a tropical and African easterly wave coming off the coast of Africa, moving into the main development region and slowly building northwest as we get out about 5, 6, 7 days from now. So that's that time frame we'd watch for any development, which would be 50-50 odds right now. Pretty good odds for this far out of something developing here, maybe into the subtropics or northern portion of the main development region here. And we'll talk about the possible evolution of the track of this system. It's going to be based on how strong the Bermuda High is over the subtropics of the Atlantic. Now, if you're looking at that and you're wondering, if it does, down long range come close to the U.S., we've got a lot of time to watch it. Typically, the amount of time it takes to reach the U.S. from that location here, just to the south east of the Cabo Verde Islands, is like 13 days out, so almost 2 weeks out. If it was to head towards the U.S., you'd have almost 2 weeks to watch it and make preparations. We're not saying that that's going to happen, but of course, if it does develop, we'll have to see where it tracks. And overall, there's a lot of different variables that'll be in play regarding said track. So let's start off with that area of interest here off the southeast coastline. Once again, visiting the relative vorticity filter on the models here. And this is looking for cyclonic spin that would be indicative of an area of low pressure trying to develop. So here's the remnants of Dexter. So that's what we're looking at for a tropical system, okay? That's an example right there. That's Dexter. As we play this out off the southeast coastline, we get into the later parts of this week, into this weekend. Notice we do have some broad circulation that does try to organize as it lifts towards Savannah over to Charleston in South Carolina by this weekend. Looks like a very disorganized, but it could be trying to get its act together and building inland. So this time around, different from Dexter, would possibly be bringing some impacts there, increased surf, squally type of weather, maybe some gusty winds. We'll have to see what happens there, but that's an area that we'll be watching as we get into the weekend time frame. It lifts north, hits the mountains, falls apart pretty quickly. Now let's jump out, same model, we'll use the GFS and jump out to that area of interest out in the main development region. So remember, it's a tropical wave that hasn't even emerged off the coast yet. So we're going to have to watch this area here, watch as we start to see some energy try to consolidate. And then on the GFS, it does start to organize something, passes north of the Lesser Antilles, and then takes a northwest turn even to the west or to the east of the Bahamas. Again, this is 9 days out. Okay, a lot can change here, and it's really going to have a big portion of what's going to drive that steering is how strong the Bermuda High is here. And I got a graphic that I'll talk about that in a second. But I want to show you the European model to kind of show the differences. European model does also start to show some development here, but I want you to pay attention to the differences in the timing, because we let this play all the way out, go right on through the middle of next week, same time frame, August the 13th. GFS had something developing out here at this point. European model's way lagging behind, likely a separate wave behind the one that's coming off the coast that may develop there. But both models are showing that the main development region is starting to wake up a little bit, okay? And now that we're in this part of the season, early August, that's not unexpected. So European shows something still well to the east of the Lesser Antilles, and then we've got the GFS showing something just to the northeast of the Bahamas. Which one will be right? Way too early to tell. And here's the differences in the track of what may develop here south of the Cabo Verde Islands. Now, depending on how strong the Bermuda High is, if it was larger and sprawled out more across the Atlantic, it would suppress a storm track farther to the south, meaning the eastern seaboard of the southeast U.S. and potentially the Gulf would be more in play for a stronger Bermuda High. If the Bermuda High breaks down, or say it splits into two, like two areas here near the Azores and one a little bit farther off towards the west, there'd be a gap, a weakness in between the two, and we'd see kind of like an exit strategy to the north here that would take this probably out to sea. Which one will play out? Again, it's still too early to tell. These are just two possible track scenarios here if something were to develop. I want to show you the comparison between the American and European now. This is something we use when we really have a robust tropical storm or hurricane to talk about. But you can see here, we have to go way far out, 10 days out from now, showing where the GFS is showing something northeast of the Bahamas. That's rather weak, probably maybe a low-grade tropical storm with that model run. And then the European model that's stronger farther to the south, again, depicting that we probably have a stronger Bermuda High, shoving it to the south and maybe even farther to the west here. But again, 10 days out. A lot can and will change between now and then. But just kind of sniffing out that things are starting to change a little bit in the Atlantic basin, more favorability. And I also will say, too, I've been looking at some tweets and looking at some of the raw data coming on in. It looks like the European and the GFS have been kind of overcompensating for how favorable the Atlantic basin may be. Models may be saying it's more favorable than it actually is, meaning they're showing a stronger system when we likely might not have a very favorable atmosphere to work with. So that may be something that kind of becomes more relevant in the next couple of days as models continue to try to decipher what exactly will go on. All right, out to the East Pac and the Central Pacific. Here's Hawaii. We've got still several areas to watch here in the East Pac. We've got a named storm, Henriette. Brand new tropical storm out there, not expected to become more than a tropical storm, which is some good news. And then another area to watch for potential development that's now got a 70% chance of developing into another named storm. I want to play out the track here on Henriette, which right now is just 45-mile-per-hour winds. But look at the track on this. By the time we get to the middle to end of the week, we could still have a low-grade tropical storm not all that far to the east of Hawaii here. It's not uncommon for storms to threaten Hawaii. It has happened multiple times over the last 5-6 seasons. We've even had hurricanes hit Hawaii, but this would likely be a tropical storm, and it may come close, it may not, but just something to watch there. The next name on the list there for the East Pac is, I think I'm saying that right, Ivo. We've got Henriette now. Gil, which came and went, topped out as a Category 1 hurricane, making it the 4th hurricane of the season out in the eastern Pacific. All right, it's time now for today's tropical trivia. All right, what's the most named storms to form in the Atlantic during the month of August? How many storms do you think there were? Were there 6, 8, 10, or 12 named storms in the month of August? I'll have the answer for you tomorrow night on Hurricane Hub Live. Just a reminder, we are here every night, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. for Hurricane Hub Live. In the meantime, scan the QR code to download the 13 News Now Hurricane Guide. It's got information on supplies you should have on hand, emergency numbers you might need, and of course, a whole lot more. Looks like things are getting active in the Atlantic, so we will have a lot more to talk about going forward. So we'll see you right back here Tuesday at 8 p.m. Enjoy your Monday.